Hi, love. Listen, most of the conversation around the Scorpio full moon is going to tell you to go look at your shadows even harder, to feel the depths of yourself, and to sit with the rage, to cry the cries. And yes, all of that is real. And there's a question nobody's asking that we have to start with. Because some of what you've been carrying as shadow, my love, has long passed its expiration date, and it's time to let that shit go. That's the territory of this full moon on May 1st, 11 degrees of Scorpio, right? This is the tightest lunar opposition of the year, and the work this lunation is actually asking for carries a lot more nuance than you think. Here's the thing about Scorpio. Astrologers talk about it like it's water, right? And it is, but it's a specific kind of water. It's fixed water, water that was once running through a river toward an ocean, water that was once moving, and somewhere along the way, it stopped. Now you've got a swamp, water that's still there, but doesn't go anywhere. There's a lot of decay in that swamp. And there's a lot of life thriving in there as well. Bacteria, growth, the things that only happen when the water sits still long enough to host all that energy. You've been in the swamp. I know, you know, we know, but here's what I want you to consider before you go do another round of your usual shadow work. Some of what you've been calling your shadow is actually a long expired skeleton you forgot to put down. Some of what you've been calling your wound is actually a story you keep retelling that's keeping you small. And some of what you've been calling your rage is real, and some of it is a shadow monster your wounded and betrayed self has been manufacturing for you to look at. So you don't have to pretend to look at the part of you that's ready for change. So, without further ado, let's talk astrology, baby. So, this is the chart of May 1st. We got the sun in Taurus at 11 degrees. We have the moon in Scorpio at 11 degrees as well. They face each other across the sky in a near perfect opposition, less than 1 degree of an orb, right? This is the tightest lunar opposition of the year, which means whatever this lunation has to teach, the tension has nowhere to hide. The moon in Scorpio is in what traditional astrology calls her fall. Now, that sounds harsh, but what it really means is that this isn't her favorite place to sit at, right? The moon has to do her work, the receiving, the feeling, the holding through Scorpio's territory of the underworld and the edges and what's been buried. And she does that work and she does it well, but she does it at a higher cost. The full moon is the moment that cost becomes visible. So whatever you've been carrying past your capacity, this is the lunation. It gets seen by you, especially. The moon shines and you can't unsee what she's lit up. And here's the part most astrologers miss. Pluto is in Aquarius as well, the modern ruler of Scorpio, which is squaring this moon, which means the moon's own ruler is asking her a hard question. Pluto wants what Pluto wants. And Pluto in Aquarius is calling for collective actualization. Pluto's coming for what we're all thinking or intuiting as a collective and breaking that silence. This is where our scorpionic swamps, our personal ones, meet the collective swamp. And the question this lunation puts on the table is, well, what are you going to do with the water now that you can actually see it? And to bring more context to the conversation, let's talk about the decan this moon falls into, which has a tarot card associated with it. Six of Cups. Some traditions call this card the Lord of Pleasure, but I want us to think about it at a different register, right? Picture a card that shows children in a courtyard, sunlight, flower in their cups, a scene that looks innocent until you realize the children are exchanging something even more than flower. They're exchanging memory, nostalgia, story, song. The Six of Cups is the card of what gets passed forward, what carries from one generation to the next generation. The history your grandmother handed to your mother, that your mother handed to you, and that you, right now, are deciding whether to carry that story forward as medicine or as a chain. This is the card of either blissful or painful nostalgia, as the potent energy which lives in the telling of those stories. That is what this full moon is asking you. What did you inherit that you've been carrying without remembering whether or not you were given it in the first place? What's the thing in your mouth that wasn't always your taste? What story did you accept as yours that was actually somebody else's wound? And now you're keeping it alive. Maybe you're keeping it alive because letting it go would mean the people who handed it to you didn't know how to set you free. Who truly robbed you of your innocence? Was it someone else? Or is it the self imposed looming shadows that limit whether you can actually see the silver lining in front of you or not? And speaking of shadows, here's where the astrology gets really specific. There's three different things getting called shadow right now, and most people don't know which one they're looking at. There's actual shadow, the buried part of you that is asking to be looked at, the thing you've been avoiding because looking at it would change your life. And then there's what I keep coming back to are these crusty and dusty ass skeletons we keep in our closets. The wounds that already finished their work, the hurt that was real when it happened, but you keep carrying it around because you don't trust that you've healed it. So you keep retelling the story to make sure it counts. And every retelling of that story reopens the wound. And lastly, the shadow monsters. This is the one most of us miss. Sometimes the part of you that has been hurt and betrayed manufactures a shadow that isn't actually there. It projects shadow onto situations that don't have shadow in them, onto people who don't have bad intent that you're reading into. The swamp wants something to focus on. It wants concentrated energy. And the wounded self knows how to do swamp. It knows how to swamp very well. So it makes more swamp. Either way, all three of these shadows carry the same medicine. The discernment is the work. Going deeper isn't the work. Discernment is. And here's the part I keep coming back to because I think this is where this full moon gets really sharp. When we tell the story of how we were betrayed again and again and again and again, we are letting the person who betrayed us win multiple times. They caused harm the first time. That is real. And every time we relive that story, they get to keep it. They are already getting away with something by how much the narrative of the wound lives inside of us. That doesn't mean that there's no accountability. There absolutely is. There should be. There's space for justice. There's room for boundaries and consequences, and absolutely making sure real harm gets named and held. And there is also a question we have to ask, whether the narrative we keep replaying is keeping us safe or keeping us small. And I'll be honest with you, this full moon is doing real work on me. I'm a Pluto in Scorpio generation. Pluto in Scorpio lives in my second house. My natal Pluto sits at the same degree as my Mercury in the eighth house in opposition, which means this full moon is sitting on top of my chart's core opposition. I'm not interpreting this transit from the outside. I am literally in it. And what's been coming up for me that I want to share with you, because I think some of you might actually be in the same territory. I'm talking about the work of breaking the spell that fear cast on my ancestry. I'm second generation Boricua, baby. My family came to the States from Puerto Rico. They survived. The way they survived was through assimilation, adopting American values, making yourselves smaller in the right ways so that the world wouldn't grind you up. And the familial expectation when I was younger was very clear. Graduate, get a job, have kids, don't be too much, don't take up too much space, don't be too queer or too creative or too unapologetic about who you actually are. And those weren't villainous expectations. The shackles were unintentionally placed by the people I loved and trusted. They were holding what they thought was safety. They were giving me the leftovers their parents handed to them. The fear was the inheritance, and the love was real, and both of those things can be true in the same breath. Now, I followed the rules for a while. I got the job, I played the part, and the pent up resentment of doing that eventually liberated me. There came a point where I had to look at the shackles. I had to see them as shackles. I had to discern between the love that placed them and the spell that traveled through that love. But either way, the wound was real. And the way we keep getting smaller after the wound is inflicted also creates more harm. The system is the system, and we have a choice about what we do inside it. We cannot let our wounds become a second victory for those who inflicted it. We will get our revenge one way or another. I can't think of a more Scorpio statement than that. But the most strategic, reclamative revenge is the power that comes from within. Energy that is siphoned through others isn't reliable. Now, the power that comes from a self who knows their worth, that's a different story. That's a different kind of revenge. That's the energy a higher octave Scorpio carries. That's how you get the water of that swamp moving. So here's what I'll offer for you, like to work with this full moon. Just this. I invite you to look at what's in your hands. Whatever your version of the swamp is, look at it. Take inventory. What's here that's actually yours to move, and what's ready to be purged? Is the shadow real, or is it paranoia? And then I invite you to ask the harder question, the what did they do to me and who hurt me questions. They have their place. They matter. They get answered first. And the harder question, the one this lunation is really asking is, where do I live in the truth of all of this? Outside of blame, outside of pointing fingers at others, where does my agency actually start? That is the move. Strategic. It's scorpionic depth used as an instrument to guide us forward. And if the spell that was cast on you came from the people you loved, then the counterspell is what you do with what you know. You break it by living, by showing yourself that you are here, by making the choice the spell told you you couldn't make, and being the person your fear-trained ancestors dreamt of being. You are not betraying them. You are completing what they started. Trust in yourself, my love. That is a relationship worth investing in, especially if it's been a while. All right, love? So the water in the swamp is going to move. That's what this full moon does. The pent up thing that's been sitting in you is going to find its way out. It has to find a way out. You can either let it move by accident in a fight you didn't want to have, or in the breakdown you've been postponing, or you can move it on purpose through the practice, through discernment and allowance, through the choice to live out what you intuitively know you're capable of living out. And once the water moves, my love, new things start to grow. That is what Scorpio is for. Metamorphosis, where water becomes the river again, and the river becomes the ocean, and the ocean becomes the rain. And this is the makings of a cycle that remembers itself. We can't let them win, whoever them is. And by them, I mean the part of the spell that wants you to stay small, and the version of yourself that has been carrying that spell forward without even realizing it. Show yourself that you are capable. Show yourself what your soul has been destined to experience. Thank you so much for listening. If this resonates and you want to do this work in community, well, the collective is open. I got horoscopes for all 12 signs, a workshop that walks the longer arc of this lunation, and a space that's been holding people through exactly this kind of work for a while now. The link is in the description. I love you all. Take care of yourselves out there. Take care of each other. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.